I do believe the 20th day. Did I lose track? Maybe it's the 21st day. We're in our wrapping up um, our. I think it's the 21st day. We're wrapping up our third week. On Sundays, tomorrow, we do the Reader's Guide and go through the questions in the Reader's Guide. And every other day, we read a little bit from this book, Blue Mind. And we've been doing this daily activity for the past 8 years without missing a single episode. And so we are reading chapter 2 at the moment, and we'll continue to do so. Yesterday, I live streamed from a remote part of the Slow Coast. The Wi-Fi, the cell signal there looked better than it was, I guess you could say. So we'll get on Verizon's case for that. The upshot was that we were live streaming from a beach where elephant seals like to hang out. So that was pretty exciting. But they were right behind us there on the beach. Right in front of you, right behind me. So lots of people were out to see them. But we're reading the end of chapter 2 today, and chapter 2 is called Water in the Brain, Neuroscience and Blue Mind, and we're on the bottom of page 35, and just the last couple of pages to read. Let's see, is that where we left off yesterday? I think so. Just a few more pages to read. So I'll just dive right in. How can the brain make sense of the vast storm? Well, we were just discussing how much information comes at us every second of every day. So how can the brain make sense of the vast storm of perceptions and other stimuli that are flooding our senses every moment? And ultimately, what was the brain slated to do based upon evolution? And this is where we left off yesterday. According to John Medina, the primary purpose of the human brain, as you could say also the human nervous system, is to solve problems related to surviving in an unstable outdoor environment, and to do so in nearly constant motion. And I summarized that yesterday. I was saying solving problems together outside in motion. And we talked a little yesterday about how our institutions are often designed, not maybe unknowingly, but our institutions, our schools, our buildings, our where we work, our government institutions are designed in a way that is the opposite of that ideal. So outside, in motion, solving problems together. This purpose required the brain to constantly grow and adapt to the challenges humanity encountered in an ever-changing and dangerous world. Through the millennia, the human brain evolved in fits and starts, with cognitive functions added and pruned based on their survival benefits. Every brain still evolves in the same way, gaining certain cognitive functions from birth and having others eliminated for efficiency through the years. So our brain is constantly changing. It's very plastic. It's constantly learning, obviously, but we're also pruning and forgetting and letting things go that aren't useful. And that it's doing that all the time. Every brain still evolves in the same way, gaining certain cognitive functions from birth and having others eliminated for efficiency through the years. What resulted over countless of centuries was a brain structure with a flexible architecture, neuroplasticity, and ultimately neural networks that were able to acquire the basic building blocks of sight, hearing, smell, and sound, which evolved into such higher level functions as writing, speech, art, and music. So just a general summary of how our brains evolve and how they work, and neuroplasticity. Actually, my using ultimately above isn't quite accurate, since in theory, while there are physical limits, there are no final endpoints to evolutionary adaptation. If we're around 1,000,000 years from now, who knows what we'll look like and be able to do. But undoubtedly, for most of us, the factors that create evolutionary advantages or disadvantages differ from what they were a few 100,000 years ago. It doesn't take a PhD to recognize that in addition to the environments in which we find ourselves, we are molded by the mental processes going on inside us in our interactions with other people. Indeed, at every moment, we are being inundated with input from several sources. The thoughts streaming through our heads, the bodily sensations that rarely attract our attention unless they demand it due to pain or pleasure. The specific perceptual neurochemical torrent produced when another human being enters our focus, and a seemingly overwhelming, never-ending streams of stimuli that arrive from every aspect of the world around us. So kind of what I'm getting at there is how much sheer information is coming at us, how little of it is important, and how our brains are able to filter out the vast majority of incoming information. It's pretty amazing. How in the world can the brain make sense of all this input? How does it separate the signals that are necessary for survival from all the other perceptual noise? It does so by becoming an expert in pattern recognition and prediction. The human brain is an amazing pattern detecting machine, writes psychobiologist David Pizarro. We possess a variety of mechanisms that allow us to uncover hidden relationships between objects, events, and people. Without these, the sea of data hitting our senses would surely appear random and chaotic. So the upshot there is, how do we manage all of that massive amount of data? Well, it turns out we're just good at it. We've got these systems on board, these mechanisms, as David Pizarro said, to do all of that. And you barely even notice that you're doing it. That's what's so cool about it. Consciously, but primarily unconsciously or subconsciously, we scan all of the incoming perceptual data and match it with what we have experienced in the past. The brain focuses on what it deems important, either because it matches previous patterns or, more often, because it does not match what is expected and could possibly be dangerous. So we're really good at looking for the things that don't make sense, the anomalies, because sometimes those are the things that can hurt you or kill you or may create big problems. It's not the familiar regular stuff. And our brains are really good at taking that familiar regular stuff and automating it and not even noticing it, because we sort of deemed it, not that it's unimportant, but it's not dangerous. So it's unimportant from a risk perspective. And so you stop really even noticing the artwork in your home, and you stop hearing the car alarm when it's been going off, making that noise forever. But the first time you hear it, first time it goes off, it startles you. Literally the second time it might startle you a little less, but by the 100th time that car alarm is beeping, your brain has already started to move it to the don't pay attention category. It's not startling you anymore. So your brain interprets what information means based on prior experience, predicts the consequences of what the information means. The processes of the subconscious mind, unlike the conscious, free decisions, occur automatically and are not available to introspection, discussion, approval, or real-time modification under normal circumstances. So things like hypnosis or other ways, and I put blue mind in that category. There are times when you're in such an extreme blue mind state that I think you're accessing some of that deeper stuff that you could get to through hypnosis or meditation or drugs, illegal or legal, that transcendent experience. And you sometimes have insights when you have those experiences. These predictions often happen below the level of and much faster than conscious thought. So I read that again. That's just a good reminder. These predictions often happen below the level of and much faster than conscious thought. And so don't fall into the trap of believing that subconscious processing is weak, useless, or inaccurate. It isn't necessarily. It's important. It's actually an important part of making any kind of decision, and it's fast, and it can be wicked accurate. The tricky part is that you may make a decision and really feel strongly about it, but not really be able to sort of line up your logic, because it's happening kind of behind that firewall in the subconscious. These predictions often happen, I heard about that, below the level of and much faster than conscious thought, as David Eagleman, a neuroscientist at Baylor University's College of Medicine, writes in Incognito, his book Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. Billions of specialized mechanisms operate below the radar, some collecting sensory data, some sending out motor programs, and the majority doing the main tasks of the neural workforce, combining information, making predictions about what is coming next, making decisions about what to do now. It takes 450 milliseconds for a baseball to reach home plate once it's released from the pitcher's hand. So I'll tell that story again. It takes 450 milliseconds for a baseball to reach home plate once it's released from the pitcher's hand. So 450 milliseconds, 1,000 milliseconds is a second. So less than a half a second once the pitcher releases the ball for it to reach home plate. So you got little less than half a second, depending on the pitch. As it zips through those 60 feet of airspace, a tremendous amount of data must get crunched by the batter. So the person whose job it is to swing a bat and hit that ball, who has, let's just say, maximum half a second to think that one through. Foremost, the swing, no swing decision must be made. Are you going to take that bat and whip it around, or are you just going to watch the ball go by? Not to mention decisions about bat speed and angle, real-time adjustments related to microclimates, and contemplations of the movement of the rest of the players on the field. So you're making a decision based on this pitch that's coming at you. You've got a half a second. You got to decide where in the air to swing your bat so that it hits the ball, where you want to hit the ball. If you're a good batter, if you're good at this job, you're thinking, where do I want to hit the ball? Because I don't want to hit right into a double play. I don't want to hit a line drive to the shortstop and have them throw out the runner on second base. I don't want to hit a pop-up fly to center field unless you want to sacrifice fly. So you're deciding where to hit the ball, how to angle the bat in order to do that, based on what the base runners are doing, based on what the ball looks like as it's coming to you. And you're reading all of that, and you've got a half a second max to figure that out. Considering that it takes about 200 milliseconds to conclude whether a player should swing his or her bat, there's precious little time to consciously bring one's full knowledge and experience to bear on a proper analysis of the situation. To even consider those 200 milliseconds time at all is generous. Yet, since 1901, Major League Baseball's batters have made favorable decisions better than 1 out of 4 times they've taken an at-bat. Those faring better often take their teams to the playoffs and on to the World Series championship game. So given that task being so daunting, the odds wildly against you that you can think that fast, yet about 1 out of 4 times batter makes the right decision. So that's a 250 batting average. If you're good and you're in the 300s, that's incredibly good, actually. That's kind of unheard of to bat 400. That means 4 out of 10 times you're making that connection, getting a hit. Those faring better often take their teams to the playoffs and to the World Series. Given the challenge of hitting a 95-mile-an-hour fastball, there's effectively no possibility that sort of average is the result of chance. So clearly some sort of cognition is going on. But how? Once the brain has taken in and analyzed data, it then must decide what to do, whether some kind of action is required. Yet how much data can one receive in a matter of milliseconds? To a great extent, this entire process is based upon trial and error. Our brains make a kind of high-speed, cost-benefit computation before we take any action, and then revise that computation based on the outcome. Familiar situations reinforce current neural pathways, but every new bit of data, every new circumstance, every mistake and new action forces the brain to remodel itself, if only slightly. If you swung a bat tens of thousands of times, you've had moments when you're conscious about adjustments you're making, such as when the team batting coach offers instruction, and are unconscious about the tens of thousands of times your deeper neural networks have absorbed those millisecond experiences. At a certain point, reliance on your conscious mind can become a disadvantage. Think too much, and suddenly you've lost your rhythm, and the ball misses the hole. The shot clanks off the rim. You play the wrong note, and you strike out. So there's this thing, called flow, or the zone, that athletes and musicians talk about. And you don't get there without a lot of practice. So that's a big part of it, is the constant practice to be good at a sport or good at a particular instrument. And once you've had that practice, that's when the letting go part becomes useful and becomes kind of magical, and that's when you start to excel, not overthinking the thing that you're doing. Of course, there is a time and a place for overthinking, and that's, some of the great athletes study their game afterwards. They watch what the other team did. They watch what their team did. They watch what they themselves did, and try to understand and improve on it, so that when they're back on the field or the court, they can unthink their way to the win, if that makes sense. At a certain point, reliance on your conscious mind can become a disadvantage. And that, I mentioned Nick Save's research at Stanford, and he wasn't really studying sports or music. He was studying economic choices around environmentally friendly technologies. And what he found is that if you overthink those choices, you often make the less environmentally helpful choice. So if you bring too much math to your decision-making process, that can actually become a disadvantage. And if you have all the time in the world, and you can kick back and just keep collecting data for years and years and years, then that's kind of what happens in academia. But for the most part, if you're standing at home plate and the ball's coming at you, you can't say, hey, I'm going to write a PhD on this pitch. You got to decide to swing or not swing. Thus, throughout our lives, the brain is literally changing itself, creating networks and neurons that accomplish needed functions efficiently. As Michael Merzenich, the father of neuroplasticity, states, by the way, Dr. Merzenich was the closing speaker, the summary speaker at our first annual Blue Mind Summit. Brilliant man. As Michael Merzenich, the father of neuroplasticity, states, the cerebral cortex is actually selectively refining its processing capacities to fit each task at hand. This is an incredibly dynamic process where gray matter volume increases in regions where more neuronal activity occurs. It is also a competitive process in which the existing networks that are no longer being used become weaker, as anyone who has learned another language and then attempted to take it up again years later knows. So you can be fluent in the language, and if you don't use it for several years, you go back to speak it, and you kind of have to search around for those, for that knowledge and the fluidity that you may have had a few years ago. And it can come back, but you got to kind of redo it to some degree. According to Merzenich, neuroplasticity is essentially bimodal. It strengthens neural networks for the things we pay attention to and weakens the areas we use the least. More complex skills, such as playing a musical instrument or driving a stick shift car, bring together different neural networks throughout the brain. And even more intriguingly, abilities lost through injury, as in a stroke, can be regained as the brain rewires itself and redirects neural function to new pathways. So we're starting to see that, people who used to figure out how to get around by trial and error, by walking places, by driving places, by actually looking around and learning the terrain, learning the geography based on landmarks and based on coastlines and based on waterways and based on the sky and trees and numbers and street names, are losing that skill because we always, or oftentimes people go to their smartphone and they just listen to their phone dictate what to do. Turn here, turn left, turns coming up, slow down, take a different route. And so they're not developing the neural pathways and the ability to make these mental maps themselves. And there's some fascinating Nobel Prize winning neuroscience research on the map making neurons, that how we actually do that, how the brain or how our nervous system makes these neurological maps, whether it's of your home, your neighborhood, your city, or even a larger scale area. And it's pretty fascinating. And I think there's some consequences of not using that ancient ability that we and our animal ancestors certainly we needed to do it before we even had paper maps. Certainly animals don't have smartphones and paper maps. They're remembering how to get places, and they're using all of their senses, sight and smell and taste and sound, and feeling their way through and navigating their mental maps even at night. Okay, last few paragraphs here to wrap up chapter 2, and then tomorrow we'll go into the reader's guide and discuss that. While there are specific types of neural pathways that most brains have in common, each person's brain maps are unique. Tracing these neural networks is the next frontier of the Connectome Project, an effort funded by NIH and spearheaded by a consortium including Washington University, University of Minnesota, Oxford University, and others, to map the connections in the human brain in a manner similar to that of the successful Human Genome Project of the 1990s, which mapped human DNA. So if you remember, that project in the 90s that mapped the human genome was wildly successful, and it's led to really countless insights into who we are, how we do what we do, how to stay healthy, how to fix problems and diseases, and how to think about human genetics, how to think about all the genetics of all life. Same thing is happening in the realm of our nervous system. So it's a pretty exciting time. In this case, scientists use brain imaging and a new technique called optogenetics, involving the insertion of special molecules into the neurons of the brain that allow their function to be switched on and off by light. Importantly, when it comes to Blue Mind, there are neural networks that are shaped by your interaction with your environment. From the time your brain starts to form in the environment of the womb until you close your eyes on your deathbed. And because of neuroplasticity, we have the opportunity to reshape our brains throughout our lifetimes by changing the input and the environment we choose. So keep that in mind. you can change your environment. You have this ability to move your body and go to a different environment. You have the ability to turn lights on and off, open windows, change the temperature, paint a wall, add different sounds, more pleasant sounds, turn off the TV, turn off the radio, and turn on music or recorded water sounds. Lots of ways to change your environment. And because of neuroplasticity, we have the opportunity to reshape our brains throughout our lifetimes by changing the input and the environment we choose. Understanding the power of Blue Mind requires taking a journey from a swimming pool to a cancer ward, from the Australian coast to the inner city, from the corner of a $5 million laboratory to the corner office of a $5 billion company. But like all journeys, it makes sense to start at home. The home in our head and the home with our bed. So that's the setup for chapter 3. The home in our head and the home with our bed. And in chapter 3, we discuss something that I refer to as the water premium or the Blue Mind premium. What is it about being near the water that adds value, not just to real estate, but to the food we eat? It adds value to our lives. It adds richness and creativity and romance and just in all ways adds value to our lives. So that's what we're going to discuss, that Blue Mind premium, the water premium in chapter 3, starting on Monday. Tomorrow, 5:30, Sunday, we will do the, go to the back of the paperback. If you've got a paperback, you'll find in the back, each chapter has sort of a reader's guide. And we go through those every Sunday. So some people just join us on Sundays. Some people follow along every day. Some people bounce in and out. You can use this book club any way you want. Some people don't watch it live. They follow up and watch the recorded version and comment along there on the recorded version. But it doesn't really matter how you read this book, just that you do it. And if you like me reading to you, you can listen in, and I'll keep reading the whole book until we get to the end of it. So happy Valentine's Day, everybody, tomorrow. Happy Galentine's Day today, if you're celebrating that. That's like, just celebrating with your friends, your girlfriends, girls, ladies, women, gals. A group of them invented Galentine's Day to celebrate their love. So wherever you are, celebrate love, celebrate your love of water. I know there are a lot of little red hearts that get thrown around on Valentine's Day. Maybe throw a few little blue hearts in the mix to celebrate our love of water. And I'm going to stop right there and upload this and answer a few of your questions that I'm not able to see while I'm live streaming.